if you're familiar with Stranger Things on Netflix, the brothers that made that, they were influenced, or they grew up in the Triangle, and they were influenced, this creepy facility in season 1, it was influenced by a real life facility just down the road from CJ and myself. And the name of the road is called Big Hole, Hole Road. And you go down the road, it's a private road, but you can drive down there. And there is a facility. It's owned by AT&T. It has no official function or purpose whatsoever, but it is known to be at least 13 stories deep.
Wow.
Now, and this is just a known fact, right? Like all the locals, that's why they named it Big Hole Road, because they dug a giant hole back there and constructed a facility underground. This is, by the way, also the most secure facility I've ever seen.
Welcome, everyone, to another installment of Cosmic Convergence. Before I introduce our guests, I'd like to give some brief background. It wasn't that long ago, nary a month, that unlike Seth Shostak of SETI, punch drunk on the Center for Inquiry debunker scotch, hell-bent to prove that there was no intelligent life out there, I searched the universe by means of the Twitter sphere, and behold, there was intelligent life. I discovered all Things Unexplained, who turns out not only to have a podcast like ourselves, but they're also on YouTube and other platforms. Reaching out to them, I discovered that while there may be subtle differences, we have much in common, one being the search of knowledge and understanding of the phenomenon, such as UFOs, NHIs, cryptids, and the sort. That being said, without further ado, I present to our viewers Dr. Mounce and CJ. Welcome to Cosmic Convergence. We're excited and thankful to have our galaxies merge for this podcast.
Thank you so much for having us. This is exciting.
Yes,
what a wonderful
thank you
welcome.
so much. We really appreciate it.
Thanks for being here.
This is
Absolutely,
great.
our pleasure.
This is great. And so I'm going to start off with the first question. Okay. And since we're just really meeting each other here for the very first time on the same screen, if you will, we'll start with Dr. Mounce. Dr. Mounce, what really brought you into this whole topic, which is so expansive, about the phenomena, about, like, let's say Bigfoot, NHIs, what the government knows, doesn't know, contact, etc.?
Yeah, that's a great question. And, you know, for me, it started a long time ago. And it started with back when I was bored as a little kid, and there were only 3 television channels, and there were no cell phones and no computers and no other screens. And eventually I got tired of playing outside, and it's not like I wanted to, watch anything on the television. So I would turn on the radio late at night, and I would tune in to Art Bell and Coast to Coast AM. And I can't tell you how many people that I've spoken to that have said similar things about Coast to Coast AM to me, that really brought them into all these topics. And, you know, every night you could tune in and you might hear UFOs, Bigfoot, you know, anything on the paranormal spectrum, ghost, hauntings. I mean, he just ran the gambit, right? And I've told people before, because, you know, some people have actually just quite recently was talking about, I guess you'd call it our style, but I said, you know what, for us, we really try to emulate what Coast to Coast AM was for me as a child. And I know that for some of our interviews, like when we had Travis Walton on with us, CJ and I literally listened to Travis's first interview on Coast to Coast AM. And we said, this is perfect. You know, we literally need to start off exactly like they did. It was respectful and to the point, and we just thought, you know what, we can't do it any better than that interview. So we just need to start there again and go from there. So that's where I really got into it, Coast to Coast AM. And I know, one of my great friends, Dane Beck, adventurer, former commercial fisherman who had his own UFO encounters, he told me that he used to hang out with his crazy aunt, and she had this van, and sometimes she would just come and park in the yard and stay for a while, right? And he'd go out there in the van with her at night, and they'd actually climb on top of the van with the old transistor radio and listen to Coast AM. And I was like, wow. I mean, it wasn't just me. So that's how I first got into it.
Oh, awesome. CJ, how about yourself?
Yeah, so I only really got into it 4 years ago when Dr. Mounce asked me to do this with him. He had written some children's themed Bigfoot books and needed to sell them. He was going to what would have been a Comic-Con type of event in 2020. It got shut down and, excuse me, everything got moved online. And he had 2 hours to fill talking about his Bigfoot books. Well, I am a complete novice. I did not grow up with Bigfoot, with UFO, with aliens. I truly believed all of that was just some sort of social lore that we had created and all agreed to pretend was real. I didn't think any of it was real. In fact, I thought people who did think it was real was kind of crazy. So I was a true novice, and we filled this 2-hour time slot doing a Bigfoot panel. So I came in with all of these questions about Bigfoot, and I'm telling you, I was a true novice. I didn't know that there was more than one Bigfoot. I thought it was just like Godzilla, like there's a Bigfoot, not not a race of species. I'm like, is it Bigfoot, big feet? What do we call more than one Bigfoot? I'm not sure. I still don't actually know. So if you know the answer to that, you can let me know. But we were asking really funny questions like, can Bigfoot catch COVID? Things like that. We had such a good time. And Dr. Mounce said, we need to do this. We need to do a podcast. And I'm like, I don't know. Could I really be the UFO mom, the Bigfoot mom? I'm not sure that I can do that. So I was very apprehensive. And then we interviewed our first person, whose name is Mr. Billy, out in Mississippi. And he had a profound UFO experience, I think back in the 70s. And there were several police officers and sheriffs present. It was well documented. He came onto our show and told us his story. And when he was done, there was no way that I could not believe it. So that was a really huge turning point for me. Here I sat there listening to this man as if the man was my own grandfather telling me this story. And he had me hook, line, and sinker. And then after we released that episode, a friend of mine called and she said, are you really doing a podcast on UFOs? And I was like, oh, yes. Yeah, other stuff too, but yeah, UFOs. And she said, I saw a UFO when I was 12 years old. Mm-hmm. And she went on to tell me her whole UFO story. And suddenly all of these people in my life started coming to me as their safe space to tell these stories of their UFO sightings, their ghost experiences, things that they've seen out in the woods, stories that they've heard from their grandparents, what have you. So now I'm a full believer. I'm no longer a skeptic. I failed my job of coming onto the show as a skeptic.
I think that you succeeded, honestly. That's both perspectives can see each other's sides as wholes, right? Mm-hmm. So I'm not talking about the A in front of the hole. I'm talking about falling into it, okay? And from my perspective, that's a very deep hole to crawl out of. So just personally, I'd like to say congratulations.
Oh, thanks. Yeah.
My background, just real quick, is a lot like Dr. Mounce's, but see, I was born in 72, and the only thing that I really remember was sitting in front of the TV at a very early age, watching In Search Of with Leonard Nimoy, which covered all of those topics.
Oh,
and then,
yeah.
Of course, yes. And then classics. I had to buy the DVDs when I found out they were released. And then, through my early 20s, well, see, I always kind of started off where I wasn't just a believer. I was kind of a knower. Like I would look out my window at like 2-3 years old and look up at the sky at night and just expecting to see something. Mm. And so it was just kind of innately in me all the time. And but then in my 20s, in my first serious job, listened to Art Bell because I worked on graveyard shift. And I love Coast to Coast still to this day. But Art Bell, what a master. He was like the Wolfman Jack of his time. I mean, really, if anybody knows anything about radio broadcasting, if to the viewers, if you don't know who Wolfman Jack is, look him up. Total trendsetter when it comes to DJing and radio. And so, yeah, so it's interesting. It's interesting what we share there a little bit, Dr. Mounce. And I want to eventually get into your children's books, which are just absolutely fascinating to me. As soon as I saw pictures of them, admittedly, you know, don't kill me, but I haven't read one yet. But as soon as I saw the pictures,
I should send you some.
That would be totally awesome. That really would. Signed, of course. I'm impressed.
Oh, he's got a terrible signature. I mean, I could just have my kids sign them and send them, and you wouldn't know.
That works too.
That makes them easier to authenticate later on.
Well, you know, to you for my kiddos because my son's getting into UFOs. So.
Oh, cool.
Oh yeah.
Daniel, you want to go ahead with the next question?
Yeah. Well, thank you again, both of you, for joining. And again, been absolutely loving your guys' radio show, and just everything you've been doing has been wonderful to listen. I've been listening on my breaks and everything else. So thank you so much for all your guys' hard work. And so, yeah, with you guys getting into researching into the phenomenon, interviewing people that are experiencers, there tends to be this kind of precipice where you cross, where the phenomenon starts reaching back at you when you start researching. Have you guys experienced this, or both of you? Would love to know a little bit more details if anything like that's happened.
I'm gonna let Dr. Mounce go first.
I know you.
Before he does, I'm gonna just tell you he's not going to answer this question. He's gonna go in circles. He's gonna ask each one of you a question, and we'll all never know. We'll never know the answer.
I actually have a fairly direct answer to that question.
Okay.
Because we have a big fan of ours that listens to all our shows that works at the school facility where my kids go. And one day I picked them up, and he comes out to me and says, "Man, Dr. Mounce, you know, have you ever been frightened or scared by the topics that you're looking into?" And by the way, later I found out that he is a remote viewer. I found that out over drinks. And I said, no, that's not ever happened to me. I've not felt that at all. You know, CJ and I, we're just letting people talk, and, you know, it is what it is. So I'm not worried about that. We're kind of like the media. We like to think of ourselves as the media sometimes. But CJ and I recently have delved deep into the Diana Pasulka story. Now, we have some synchronicities ourselves with Diana Pasulka. And if you've read her book, American Cosmic, then you'll understand that synchronicities play a major part in the things she talks about.
Oh, for sure.
Diana Pasulka lives in Wilmington, North Carolina, which is just down the road from CJ and myself. CJ, interestingly, also used to live in Wilmington. Also not far from here is one Chris Bledsoe, author of UFOs or UFO of God, who Diana Pasulka has also been to visit. And by the way, Chris Bledsoe introduced Diana Pasulka to Tim Taylor, who we definitely know is Tyler D in her book, American Cosmic. So Diana Pasulka claims that, you know, she was taken out into the New Mexico desert. Turns out it was the plains of San Augustine, which I have a lot of interest in. And it was Tyler D or Tim Taylor that took her and Dr. Gary Nolan out there. Well, I mean, I couldn't help it, y'all. Like, I'm so intrigued by this whole story. And I started digging, or trying to dig just a little bit into Tim Taylor. And then I was here one night, and it was just me, and it was the kids. And just out of nowhere, I thought, wait, I think I need to make sure the doors are locked. Like, this overwhelming sense of anxiety and dread came over me that has honestly never come over me in this house. And I did. I made sure the doors were locked and the windows are shut, you know, all that good stuff. And it was all because of this one figure, Tim Taylor. And we've had people on with us since then who have told us off the record that they have felt like their lives were in danger, that they have literally been under attack from potential energy weapons, that they have their research set on a trigger on their computers, that if something were to happen to them, it would be disseminated out into the world, into the public. Now, this is a very high-level academic that told us this, okay? And so that has been when it really reached back out to me for the very first time, to be honest. There you go, CJ.
The dead man
You remember
switched.
when he said he had a direct
Yes,
answer
dead
to
man
that
switch.
question?
That's exactly right.
Sorry, CJ.
So I will say that I live a very fearful life. I've always been afraid of everything. When I was a kid, I was the kid that slept with the covers over my head. Stop it now with the music. So I'm very fearful, to be honest. And I've had a lot of people through this podcast reach out to me and say, actually, you know, the phenomenon's beautiful and loving. And if you're putting out good energy, you get good energy back from the phenomenon. And so I appreciate that. But every time I finish a podcast, I close my eyes and I look up and I say, universe, I'm not ready. I'm not ready to be an experiencer. I'm not ready to have any event happen to me. So the only way that it's really come back to me is a lot of sleepless nights. We've had some people on this show that have told us really terrifying things that I have not been able to get out of my head, especially as they relate to children and crossbreeding and things like that. So I've lost a lot of sleep over it. But I think the biggest way that I've been impacted is just through the connections and relationships that I've made with people who are experiencers and what they have gone through. And it's really opened my mind and my heart to so many more possibilities. So that's been the biggest thing for me, but no hitchhiker effect yet with people that we've interviewed, and no experiences. And as I said, I'm not ready for them. I would never go to Skinwalker Ranch. I wouldn't do it. You could not pay me to go there.
That's understandable. That's understandable because, you know, yeah, Skinwalker Ranch is one of those places where if anything's going to happen, it's going to be there. And so, yeah, you kind of have to really go in. I don't know if I would be prepared. And I'm an experiencer. Actually, Daniel is, and so is Christian. So,
wow.
But yeah, I don't know if I would just be like, yeah, just going to go take a jog over to Skinwalker Ranch. Hey, Mr. Taylor, can you show me around? Yeah. You know, let's go party now.
Dadgummit, let's do this.
Brandon Fugel on
That's what
a few
he'd say.
months ago, and he pretty much said he wouldn't let anybody on the ranch. He doesn't let his own kids on the ranch. He just said it's far too dangerous. So other than the people that he has hired and trained to work there, they're not ever going to let, you know, tourists come and check out the ranch.
Christian?
It's unfortunate. Well, a quick question actually to Dr. Mounce. I heard you mention North Carolina. Are you in North Carolina?
CJ and I are both in North Carolina. We compete
cool. Me too.
against.
Oh,
awesome! I thought one of you were, and I meant to ask that before we came on there. CJ and I compete against each other in a sand volleyball league. If that tells you how close we live to each other, our kids are best friends.
Yes,
and we go to the same church sometimes. And yeah. I mean, I'm definitely going to be there in the morning. Yeah.
I'll be teaching your kids tomorrow morning. So
yeah, we're actually in the Triangle. We're in the Raleigh-Durham, Chapel Hill area.
Oh, that's cool. Yeah, I live in Raleigh, and
oh, awesome.
Yeah, because you mentioned Wilmington. I lived in Wilmington before living in Raleigh about a year ago. So
or synchronicities.
Cool. Small world.
And you know, Chris Bledsoe's in Fayetteville, or Vietnam, as the locals like to call it.
Yeah, I read his book and I was surprised. I was like, oh crap, he's in North Carolina. I was like, that's crazy. And also Pat Pearsall, she also lives in North Carolina.
Oh yeah, I forgot Pat's up there too.
Yeah.
Man, y'all are
Y'all is right. You said it right, y'all.
But I just wanted to ask, because you guys interviewed a lot of people, and I wanted to, it's something I noticed, but have you guys noticed this kind of shift in consciousness, awareness that's kind of happening? Because it's kind of super weird. Like, you have more people talking about this stuff more. And because more people are talking about this stuff, it's like giving people the courage to come out and tell their own stories that they held for so many years. And all these similarities are starting to like interconnect. People sharing near-death experience stories, all of that stuff, UFOs now, all of that stuff. Have you guys noticed a pattern, or what have you guys noticed or like when it happened to you and you're like, wait a minute, there's something going on here?
Yeah, I think I'm proof that there's a big shift happening because, like I said, I didn't grow up with any of this. It was not something that I would typically talk about. It was certainly not a topic I ever considered. And now it's everyday conversation for me, probably because I do the podcast, but I can't go to a school function, to a birthday party, to church, anything without people asking me about the podcast and UFOs and what I've heard and what I believe. But there definitely seems to be a lot of crossover in experiences that people have had. And Tim and I often will sit down and go, oh my gosh, that's so weird. They said this, but they also said this. And we try to go back in our podcast and listen to exactly what this person said, because some of the similarities are just so intense that you think to yourself, well, they can't be making this up, right? Like
That's validity.
Yeah. Just really specific details that multiple people who don't know each other are sharing. And I do think that so many more people feel safe to share their stories now. There's still a little bit of taboo about the topic, especially with women, I find. Like if I go somewhere and a female asks me about the podcast, I get it very short, like, oh, that's interesting. Okay. But if a male approaches me about the podcast, they want to talk for hours about it. So I'm not totally sure why that's still happening, but there are tons more women in this field now too. So it's growing.
So mentioning colleagues or associates, people like at your church functions. My next question is when you both, and this can, CJ, you can answer it, or Dr. Mounce, you can answer it, whoever wants to go first on this one. The immediate like family and friends, when coming out and being like, okay, this is what I really want to research. This is the direction that I'm going, podcast, not even the podcast, just like having conversation with people about the subject. And as being, of course, quite taboo. Again, I was born in the 70s. All we really had was In Search Of. And as I said to other people in the 90s, it was X-Files, and us knowers and believers were like, the disclosure is going to be here tomorrow, man.
Every Sunday night. We had an X-Files watch party.
There you go. But, people that we work with, friends, some family members, it's like, it's kind of like politics. You just don't talk about it. So when kind of almost like coming out in the open, just being like, because we
coming out as a UFO believer. Yeah.
Correct. Did you get, not to go into any personal detail or anything, but did you get any like significant backlash or lots of hugs?
Well, for me, honestly, it's become the only thing we talk about. Pretty much.
Same here.
Yeah. I mean, it's amazing. Like, I feel like my friends, CJ, mine's friends, they needed this. They needed this podcast. It wasn't just us. It was all our friends and acquaintances. They needed it too. So our friend Alabama George, Bama George, he helps us do field research, right? Like, and he loves it. I mean, he called me the other day and he said, Tim, what are you up to? We're about to go down to Big Hole Road. And Big Hole Road, if you're familiar with Stranger Things on Netflix, the brothers that made that, they were influenced, or they grew up in the Triangle. And they were influenced, this creepy facility in season 1, it was influenced by a real life facility just down the road from CJ and myself. And the name of the road is called Big Hole, Hole Road. And you go down the road, it's a private road, but you can drive down there. And there is a facility. It's owned by AT&T. It has no official function or purpose whatsoever, but it is known to be at least 13 stories deep.
Wow.
Now, and this is just a known fact, right? Like all the locals, that's why they named it Big Hole Road, because they dug a giant hole back there and constructed a facility underground. This is, by the way, also the most secure facility I've ever seen. You drive down the end of the road, it's Major Creepsville. It's straight out of Children of the Corn. These sporadic houses that just are pristine and they're so pristine and clean, it's obvious. You know what I mean? Like not a speck of trash anywhere. not a kid's toy, not a bicycle, nothing. And all the front doors had these signs like, welcome neighbor, that kind of stuff, or howdy, just like straight out of what was that movie you compared it to the other day, CJ?
Truman Show.
The Truman Show, yeah, right. Straight out of the Truman Show. And then
No,
also
thank you.
we were recently talking about the Reddit whistleblower disclosure, which has since been deleted. And he said that he went for an interview at some point in a skiff in somebody's house. And I said, you know what? That's the houses on Big Hole Road right there. And they all have these little brick short buildings. They're not really buildings. They're just something. And they just remind me of ventilation shafts. But Bama George, back to the point.
I was going to say, do you remember what the question was?
I'm going to bring it back in, circle back here. Bama George calls me and is like, Tim, man, we about to go down Big Hole Road. You want to ride down there with us? I'm like, dang, I can't go right now. I just can't get up and go. And then he calls me back later. He's like, yeah, so there's these 3 silos across the street, which is really bizarre because there's no farm animals and there's no fields or anything. But sure enough, there's 3 silos across the street. He said, we went out there to them and there's these mechanical noises coming out of the silos. I said, we got to find out who owns that property with the silos. I found out so many very interesting things about Big Hole Road, but I'll digress on that. Our other friend, Mr. J, who we call our military consultant because he is, but he's also our dear friend, right? Mm-hmm. And he and I almost exclusively now talk about UFOs and aliens and the phenomenon. So I think our friends really needed this podcast. It's basically all we ever talk about anymore. It's just the thing. And I think they want to hang out with us more now, to be honest. I also want to follow.
Wait, a few of our friends. I've had a very different experience. I have lost friends over it. I've had people tell me I'm stupid, say that it's BS. I have people in my life that I just don't talk to anymore because of it. I've had a lot of female friends just not support what I'm doing at all. I will say the person I was most worried about was my mom, and she's been 100% supportive. In fact, I think she's learned a lot too on this journey with me. And I'm pretty sure my dad was reverse engineering UFOs for his job, which is maybe why we didn't talk about it at all in our household. But yes, our mutual friends have been really supportive, but I've had a rougher road.
Well, let's face it, you didn't need those friends anyway.
I didn't. And going back to what we had Becky Cook on our show early on, and she's a Bigfoot expert, and she said to us that her mom always said that our minds are like a parachute and they work a lot better when they're open. So open-minded people are a lot more enjoyable anyways.
That's so true. Do y'all care if I follow up on what Christian asked a while ago?
Sure.
No, please.
Yeah, so you were talking about, do we sense anything coming, or do we see, more people being involved in the phenomenon and the topic?
Yeah.
Here's what I've seen from the people we've talked to. It's a lot more widespread than people realize.
Yes.
And not just UFOs, but much more than that. Abductions, alien encounters, the paranormal, the spiritual. And by the paranormal, I also mean, into things like ghosts, hauntings, and they are connected in ways that we definitely don't quite understand. But this is what CJ and I have noticed, and I dare say almost beyond a shadow of a doubt, y'all, because we have had folks on like Bob Salas, right? Mm-hmm. He's on to talk about his experience at the Malmstrom nuclear facility, where UFOs literally shut down our nuclear arsenal for a time being. Mm-hmm. And if you watch about Bob Salas on any television shows or media, that's what you're going to see about Bob Salas. But guess what? Bob Salas revealed to us. Bob Salas has also been abducted by aliens. Mm-hmm. And they painfully removed semen from his body. So he was also experimented on by aliens. We've had astrophysicists on with us who talked about astrophysics while they were on the show. And analyzed from a physics point of view, UFOs and such. But then after the show, told us horrifying things, things that we were not expecting. Things like they're pretty sure their sibling was abducted by aliens, that their sibling used to see giant praying mantises staring into their window, which, by the way, I've come to find out that other people have had these encounters with giant praying mantis type of creatures.
Mm-hmm.
We've had people tell us off the record, scientists, that their children have had encounters with what they could only describe as ghosts, but that they presented themselves as other young children. The connotation was obvious that they believed that this was actually the phenomenon, the same phenomenon that was manifesting itself as giant praying mantises, but then now manifesting itself as a pleasing form to their children in order to put them at ease and that sort of thing. So what we have noticed is that it is just much more widespread than any of us know, because so many people literally just cannot talk about it. It would put their professional reputations and careers and families at stake, and most people are simply not willing to risk that.
It's heavy stuff. It's definitely heavy stuff.
Yeah, I'm sorry about that.
No, that's okay. When we had our interview with Nathaniel Gillis, that's really heavy stuff, and a lot of those resound with Nathaniel Gillis's research, as well as Jacques Vallée, as well as Steve Mera. That the phenomena will often show itself to whatever makes us the most comfortable at the time. And, I can't even pretend to think myself about really what their goal is. Or what the purpose is. I think that their understanding it might be a little bit different than ours. It's a wild ride, and everybody has such different experiences. But again, as you mentioned before, there's a lot of similarities that are interwoven as well. And that just fascinates me even more. Has there been a certain interview or a testimony from a witness that you've heard, aside from the ones that we've already discussed, that has really just set you back and wondered, should I consider still researching this subject?
In a negative way, should I stop researching this subject, or do I need to push further? Either way. Let's go with the positive. We need to research this further. Sure. You want to go first, Dr. Mounce?
No, you take it. I could tell something's on the tip of your tongue.
Oh, sure. So we had a woman on our show named Oracle Araya. And before she came on, Tim had messaged me and said, hey, we're going to have this woman on our show. And I started doing a little bit of research about her. And this was pretty early on in the podcast. And her story was that she was abducted by aliens, and they did a spinal cord replacement surgery on her. And at the time, we were really building our podcast, and I thought, Tim, I don't know. I just think that it's going to make us sound unbelievable, and that it's going to discredit all of the work that we did before. I don't know about this. Well, she came on our show, and she's beautiful, radiant, just whatever has happened to her has worked in her favor, because she looked so good. There was just this aura about her. So it's taken aback by that, because normally in the past, I would have thought anybody that was an experiencer was maybe a little bit out there or different or what have you. So here this beautiful woman comes on, and she spent about an hour and a half, maybe 2 hours with us, telling us her story. And every single bit of it was believable to me. Every single bit of it resonated with me. Every word she said rang true to me. I had a lot of synchronicities with her as well. So after that interview, I said, okay, I need to shed all of my hesitations and reservations. I need to just dive into each interview with an open mind and an open heart, because clearly there's something happening here, that I've been the problem. and not believing it and not wanting to hear it. And there are lots of other people out there that still have that armor up. But she certainly sent me into the next level of, okay, this is real. This is real.
Good. Dr. Mounce?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of examples of that. Just recently, we had Dan Morin on with us, and he's known as the fifth pillar of emphasis on TikTok and other places. And he's a big guy right now in the UFO community. And he recently had a major revelation for us on the Roswell incident, and seemingly something nobody had ever thought about before. And that was, we have this infamous photo of the military person with some weather balloon debris, right? Well,
Ramsey.
Right, Ramsey. Where is the payload cable rope that is attached to the weather balloon? Mm-hmm. If this was a weather balloon, it would have had a payload cable. It would have been the most prominent thing that Brazel, the rancher, would have found. It would have been written up in all the reports, and it probably should have been there in the photo as well. Keep in mind, by the way, so I posted that, and Dan was right. Nobody seems to have realized that this critical piece of information was missing. But then a friend of mine from Roswell commented on that post, and he pointed out also that, yeah, not only that, but look carefully at that debris. It looks like they just went over to the weather balloon store and bought a brand new one, literally opened the box up and broke it out right there in front of the cameras. It is pristine. It is spotless and shiny and perfect. Okay, the thing is, that debris had been out there for quite a while in the New Mexico desert, where I have been out there before. And let me tell you, it's rough. During that time period, they had deluges of rain, of wind, of extreme heat, all kinds of weather. But yet here is this pristine collection of debris being showcased in front of the media and having pictures taken care of. Yeah, right. I'm not buying it. But what that taught me is that here in 2024, we can still have new revelations about things, from 1947 and from all along through there. We just have to keep after it. If the truth is out there and we believe, just like, Mulder did, that the truth is still out there. And by the way, shame on CJ for failing as our Scully. No, I'm kidding.
No, she just came around faster than Scully did. It didn't take you to be abducted, Dr. Mounce, in order for
CJ. Like 4 seasons.
Yeah, I'm like, I can't wait for 4 years of, Scully's skepticism. Oh, one episode she's in. What the heck? CJ and I actually were Mulder and Scully for last Halloween.
Oh, that's awesome. I'd love if you shared a picture.
But only because she vetoed my original idea. Yeah, you remember what the original idea was?
Yeah, you wanted to be Jack the Ripper, and you wanted me to be one of his victims.
Dang, that's dark, Dr. Mounce.
I know. And we were going on a local news station to do a fun segment for Halloween, and that's what he wanted to do. I was like, no, we're not. Mm-mm.
I just thought it would be very cerebral. I just thought this would be really super cerebral. But we had
that cerebral audience that watches the news at 9:30 in the morning.
Yeah, like that 2%.
Yeah. Well, we had just, to be fair, we had just had Patricia Cornwell on with us to talk about her new book, which integrated Bigfoot into it. And rumor is her next novel is going to integrate the UFO phenomenon into it. And so we're actually looking forward to talking to her about that. But she's also quite the Jack the Ripper expert as well. And CJ doesn't understand it, but I've tried to tell her Jack the Ripper it's just a fascinating case, and people are endlessly fascinated by the story. I dare say Jack the Ripper is the most famous serial killer of all time, the most famous killer. These are the most famous murder cases in the history of civilization. all right, probably has had more movies, television shows, podcast, radio broadcast, etc. done on it than anything else. And so she had made a Twitter post about one of the victims, and the name escapes me, but don't Google the name of this victim. The name of it will come up, because if you Google it, you will be horrified. And again, that's even in 2024. And look at all the things we still don't know. So for me, yeah, we have so many guests on that just show that, you know, there's a lot more out there that has yet to be understood. And we want to grab part of that truth as well.
Absolutely. Yeah, we all have puzzle pieces. Before I turn over to Daniel, we all have puzzle pieces to bring to the table. And while we may still be missing quite a number of puzzle pieces, right? Nothing's more annoying than you get a puzzle and you're like trying to put it together and you're like, wait a minute, I don't have any pieces left. They gypped me out of my box. You know,
nothing is more annoying than that. Truly, that makes me crazy.
Exactly, and that's maybe why people call us believers and experiencers woo. But that's besides the point. The more people that bring their puzzle piece to the table, the more of a completed, not complete, completed picture we will get. Mm-hmm. And that's really important. So going back earlier to the interview, when Dr. Mounce, when you said that your friends, your family, and others, the community essentially, humanity essentially, needed the podcast. That's very true. And we're all doing our part in trying to help put that puzzle piece together, because there are more people out there that have experiences, that are afraid to talk about them, that don't know who they can come to. And that's probably one of our primary focuses for starting our own podcast, was to try to give comfort to those that want to have their voices heard, to know that they are not alone and that they're not woo or crazy, and that we are people that have experienced things like they have, or have had the same thoughts that they have. And so, again, that's why it's such an honor to have both of you on this show for this interview, because we are like-minded in that way. Very much so, very much so.
I imagine through all those people you've spoken with, you may have gotten some, like you mentioned, Rob Salas. And I actually wouldn't be surprised if David Shinley, who was the other captain who came forward to talk about the nuclear bases at the 2013 hearing, I wouldn't be surprised if he had something too, because I feel like a lot of these people tend to have that history. But what do you think in terms of like positive and negative? Like, has it been leaning more towards one for you, or leaning more towards the other, or about equal? And that's open to either of you.
Yeah. I'll take it. I'll take it first. I will say that every single guest that we have had on the show has been an incredible human being. They have been very open-minded, very loving, a deep spirituality about them. They are operating on a higher frequency. Genuinely incredible people. And I think that all is interconnected to whatever this phenomenon is that we are experiencing. I think that those people who are experiencers start to see the universe for what it is, get less wrapped up in themselves, in their day-to-day lives, in their fame and fortune and whatever else, and start to realize that they are a tiny, tiny, tiny piece of that puzzle that we are talking about. And they have a lot more respect for other people, for the earth, for their relationships. So I can't say that we've had a single person on our show that afterwards we said, oh, that person was not very kind. Everyone's been really a joy.
Which kind of just shows the impact that their experiences have had on them. It's so profound. It's almost like night and day. Mm-hmm. It's much like Christian will share about his, the stories about NDEs, where they'll just be living a miserable life, quote unquote, and then they have their NDE and they're like, I'm going to make the best of what I have here left. Dr. Mounce?
Well, I have to tell you, so I believe firmly that there is a connection to ancient accounts of the phenomenon, that we need to pay more attention to these ancient accounts, and that they could be really informative and really telling. And I think that what we're seeing today in terms of positive and negative has really been reflected to us, you know, maybe for thousands of years, definitely for centuries. If you look at religious text, you're going to find examples of both, right? Examples of the good, examples of the bad. And the Bible, you know, I grew up quite religious, and they always told me, you know, hey, there's a reason that hell, we know a lot more about hell than we do heaven. The Bible, interestingly, talks more about hell and all the ways to get sent there. And
my
what
kids'
it's
vacation
like.
Bible school definitely did this week.
Yeah,
I was
see,
like,
that's what I'm talking about.
Jeez, this is really
Yes.
intense.
CJ's kids were at vacation Bible school, and they're just like what happened to me, right? Like it got thumped to me every Sunday morning, Sunday night, Wednesday night, tent revivals, you know, all of it. But it's also true. The Bible is, and other religious texts are more descriptive of hell, for example, and demons than they are of heaven and angels, which is a really interesting thing to think about. But now we've had it both ways with people we've talked to. One very interesting case is Travis Walton, who CJ and I just think the world of. And he's so believable. But if you watch Fire in the Sky, yes, he's amazing. But if you watch Fire in the Sky,
it's not like
we also see how they twist people's experiences, right? And good or bad, the bad part, if there is a bad part, sells better to the public than the good parts, right? So Travis, you know, Fire in the Sky was horrifying. It was, and it had that infamous scene in it where, you know, as this thing wrapped around him, they slit a slit in his mouth, just so you know, and which none of that happened. And Travis actually had a very positive experience, and he relayed to us, and I know that he's relayed this to other people, that, you know, it was his fault he got hurt.
Yeah.
He did something quite foolish. He just went running up at the UFO. You know, I feel like my mama used to tell me things like nothing good happens after midnight. Well, she probably definitely would have said, you know, don't go running up at the UFOs. You know, that's just probably not a smart thing to do.
Don't run to the light, Caroline.
Don't run to the light. And he had an accident, right? And Travis fully believes that whatever it was took him on board this craft and mended him back to health. And this is what happened to him during his missing time, during the time that he was gone, right? Quite a different story than Fire in the Sky would portray.
He did say that while he was on the craft, he was terrified, that he was absolutely terrified that they were taking him, that they were hurting him, whatever. It wasn't until much later in life that he realized that they might have been healing him.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah, well,
and
I mean, imagine, you know, imagine it's just like there you are, and you've always loved Roger Rabbit. You've seen, as a kid, you've seen Roger Rabbit, you know, 20,000 times. And here you are, a teenager, and you walk into your kitchen at midnight, and there's Roger Rabbit standing there. You're going to get freaked out, right? You're going to be like, so it doesn't really matter because that's not what we're used to, right? So, of course, Travis is going to be a little stunned about that. Yeah. Sorry, Dr. Mounce.
No, that's quite okay. And we want to encourage everybody to check out the documentary called Travis, which is the much more accurate representation of what happened to Travis Walton. And one very, you know, funny note that Travis hit on our show is one of us asked him, you know, have you had any other UFO encounters since then? And quite to our surprise, on the way back from a conference, a UFO conference, I think it was in California, wasn't it, CJ?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah. Travis and his son were driving down the road, and one of these triangular craft approached their vehicle from above. Our friend Mr. J, the military consultant, he's had an encounter with a silent triangular craft. And his son's like, Dad, let's stop. Let's check it out. And Travis like, no, son, I think we're just going to keep on moving. So even though Travis had quite a pleasant, and, you know, he doesn't describe his abduction as such a horrifying thing as representing Fire in the Sky, he still is not going to make the same mistake twice, right? Now, I do want to bring this up real quick.
Sure.
Something we need to think about in terms of the bad is I think that a lot of the bad isn't just demons or malevolent races of extraterrestrials, but it's people too. And I've seen that part of the phenomenon as well. So I think that anytime that we have bad aspects of the phenomenon, there are humans attached to that bad aspect as well, who are working with it, who are trying to get their own gains and ulterior motives from that, be it military power, be it personal wealth, be it fame. We've totally seen this to be the case as well, be it scientific experiments, just like off Jurassic Park, sort of, right? Like, you know, they tried so hard to figure out if they could, they didn't stop to think if they should. And a scientist we had on recently is brought to mind from Switzerland, Dr. Astrid Stockelberger. And she kind of set the internet on fire talking about, and by the way, wow, she blew our minds.
Yeah, that was a wild
time.
Interview. That was a wild interview.
My gosh. It was mind blowing. But one of the biggest things she's talked about, and by the way, she's on Telegram. A lot of the things she sends out is in other languages, but she is mind blowing on Telegram. But she talked about how CERN, the particle, giant, huge particle collider underground over there in Switzerland, that at the bottom of CERN, they're actually opening portals to other dimensions that other beings are coming through. She described at least 13 races of beings coming through portals to subatomic dimensions. And I find that endlessly fascinating, but also endlessly disturbing, because you can guarantee it's not like they're trying to invent the light bulb. You know what I mean? Like, I doubt that they're working on this for free energy or, to clear up the greenhouse gases or whatever in the atmosphere. I suspect there's something else going on.
And that's Stuckelberger for anybody that wants the non-Southern accent of her last name.
and I would go ahead and suggest that anyone viewing this if it's very interesting about CERN and the rituals that are happening there at CERN. And she goes into great detail. What's the name of that specific episode? Do you remember off the top of your head? That way people can go to it after watching this.
We could also link it in the description.
Yeah.
We'll link it, but
well, if you go to our YouTube, so we're all Things Unexplained is our podcast, and it was portals at CERN, right?
Yeah, I'm looking it up real quick. And
Right.
I tell you what, one thing you can check out if you want to be freaked out, if you think that we are exaggerating about rituals and such at CERN, check out Google the opening of this tunnel, the Gothard Tunnel.
Is the weirdest.
In Switzerland, and holy satanic rituals. Like, what in the world are they thinking that this is an appropriate thing to do for opening a freaking highway tunnel? I don't understand, but yet there it is. It's an endless parade.
It just got stranger and stranger.
Rituals straight to hell, and I kid you not. And there they are. They are aware of the lore. They promote it. They accentuate it. They push it out there. I have no idea why they do that. They even faked a human sacrifice, let's hope it was a fake, on the grounds of CERN next to this huge statue of Shiva, who represents the god or goddess of doom. If I'm not mistaken, that episode is called CERN Mysteries and Beyond with Dr.
It's also
Astrid
really weird.
Stockelberger.
Like a lot of weird little symbols there, and
everything is done on purpose. Nothing is done as
and all their launches
waste.
and everything.
I lived in Denver, and I had a lot of weird stories about that airport and the weird history behind that too. It's strange.
So,
we
mentioned. First off, I want to say that I've noticed that CJ has been drinking out of a very stylish mug.
So I have to get Tim to put the logo here so that when I drink it, it's there and I don't have to, like, who
By
drinks
the way, is that coffee I've been wanting to ask you all
No,
night?
it's just
Are you
water.
drinking coffee at 10:30?
No, just
what?
Water.
And a very cool hat. A very
Vodka.
cool hat.
Thank
You
you.
can
Not
find these
vodka.
on the All Things Explained store, which we will put in the description.
No, it's unexplained. We don't explain anything. Let's not be
sorry.
mistaken.
Well, I don't know. I have a feeling that something has been explained this evening, but you know, you might catch us slipping up on it sometime. We'll see if you guys figure it out. The audience figures it out. But very stylish hat, very stylish mug, and there's all other kinds of stylish gear to gear yourself up in the All Things Unexplained podcast.
Our logo has changed and evolved so much over time, but I'm really liking where it is now.
Your logo is really great. Oh.
We like to say, show your support for UFO disclosure. We're not promising it will actually go toward disclosing
it will
anything.
Definitely go
it will
towards
definitely
coffee.
help us out, but you can show your support for UFO disclosure.
And by the way, the new shirt, Support Our Whistleblower, is great. I like it.
Thank you.
Kind of the 1950s style, and he's got the whistle, he's got the hat, you know, and everything. So it's great. And I'm sorry, I apologize. My bandwidth is real garbage right now. So congratulations. Thanks, military. Anyway.
It's because we started talking about CERN.
Or the hat.
That happened endlessly in our interview, too. Every time she would bring up certain things, boom, she would get disconnected.
Mm-hmm.
We've had that different times with different guests, for sure.
Yeah, it was the word eclipse. Every time she said the word eclipse, we lost her.
What do you both think about some of that footage? I'm sure you've seen it. The footage ever since the eclipse, where you saw like the cigar craft going like above the clouds, and now I'm starting to see more and more footage of shadows going through clouds. Have either of you seen those?
I have not seen these. Is this in relation to when the eclipse was happening?
Some were, and now it seems to be more regular. Regular. I'll find those and try to share.
Yeah, I didn't see any of those.
Well, one thing we like to say, and I think it was Avi Loeb who first told us this, the skies, as of now, are not classified, and we really just need to keep our eyes on it. One thing we can do when we're not podcasting or what have you is we can get off our screens and we can just get outside. You know, we can look up, and I was doing this recently with the kids. I was somewhere, and I guess it was about 7 o'clock at night. This was just a few weeks ago. And I commented in the video, I made a little video that I'm just.
So you had your screen on you, is what you're saying?
I did have the screen nearby, but I was listening to bluegrass music and having a hazy IPA, and the kids were playing games. And, you know, I was in a good space, and I'm just looking up at the sky. I'm like, well, I guess that's just kind of what I do. And there's plane traffic. CJ and I don't live too far from Raleigh-Durham International, so we have our fair share of plane traffic, right? But then the sun catches a glare off something way out there and moving super fast and heading right toward the storm in the distance. And I said, what is that? That just doesn't seem to be a plane, okay? There's lots of planes moving through here. It seems too small. It's too far away. It looks like a tic-tac, and it's moving super fast. So I took out my phone, I filmed it, and my son commented when I zoomed in, it looks like it's rotating. So it did have this appearance of like spinning around like this. And so I think that we would be surprised at what we would notice if we just, you know, did start paying attention to the skies more often. I think there's stuff out there in the daytime. I think there's stuff out there at night. And there's just a lot of stuff, a lot of clutter. We got private corporations sending stuff up. We got China sending spy balloons over us. We got our military shooting down UFOs over Dead Horse, Alaska, that they won't tell us jack about. So, I mean, there's just a plethora of things that we could be seeing.
I can't encourage the viewing audience enough to go and check out All Things Unexplained. You guys do a live interview. It seems like practically every, Friday, Sunday?
Every time Dr. Mounce tells me, we're doing it.
Okay.
It's like,
We're
no,
on
we
right after the shows matter. No.
Yeah, typically Wednesday nights. I feel like most of our live shows are Wednesday nights.
Okay.
Sometimes
Tell
Fridays.
us-
It depends on the guest that we're having because
Yeah.
they
But
come
we have a
from
new
all over the
audio
place.
episode out every Monday. New audio
Yes.
episode every Monday.
Okay. Could you do the official informing the viewership and the listenership where they can find you?
Yeah, sure. So you can find us at allthingsunexplained.com. You can get to anything about us from there. We really love our YouTube channel. We have lots of great conversation and comments that happen on all of our videos. So please do join us there, like, subscribe, share. And of course, anywhere you get your podcast, you can find us under All Things Unexplained.
That's right. And check out their shop.
And you can follow me on Twitter. You'll be like my 13th follower because I'm terrible at these sorts of things. And I don't even know what my Twitter handle is, but I don't think it's the Unexplained CJ.
Speaking of, I made a few posts today. If you don't mind reposting them sometime, CJ, I'd appreciate it.
Well, I want to thank all of our listeners and watchers and just humble ask for you all to like, share, subscribe, and follow us on Apple Podcasts, on Spotify, here on the tubes. You can find us on Facebook. You can find us on TikTok. You can find us on, most of the social media platforms. And thank you again for joining in on this Cosmic Convergence of All Things Unexplained and Cosmic Convergence itself.
Yeah.
Until next time, love you all. Thank you.
Love you guys too. Thank you.
Bad monkey.